community agencies that have been trying very hard to help with DACA folks, but again, I think the invisibility is amazing, what we don't know, and the rhetoric coming from our government is making things obviously much more difficult if you're different.
Oh, yeah.
So, because of the philanthropic work that we're doing is called Forward Promise, I was mentioning the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation funding, we've learned more about other communities' needs and challenges, and Make the Road New York is one of those, I would say, that stood out to us.
Have you had any luck? I mean, one of the things that Philly is definitely being known for lately is the tremendous success that y'all have had with your athletic communities, just having won last week with the NCAA with Villanova, and then, of course, the several months back winning the Super Bowl. So I was wondering, have you had any luck in terms of having any of the athletes in the community help you with some of this research? Because I know a lot of times our youth want to hear what our athletes have to say and what they've gone through. So I was wondering if you've had any kind of experience with having any dealings with the athletes, be they some of the Eagles, be they some of the Flyers on the soccer side, or the Phillies, or any of the other sports teams that are out there, including Villanova.
Well, with somebody from North Carolina, you know a lot. That's pretty good. I think we're a happier city, honestly, right? People get in a bad mood, all you got to do is say the Eagles won the Super Bowl and people will stop fighting with each other. But I think Malcolm, the cornerback for the Eagles, has been known as a very powerful person, and it's somebody we would actually like to get more time with. But it hasn't developed yet, but we're very interested in trying to increase the contact with our sports heroes here now, and those who are definitely committed to community work.
Yeah, it seems to me that that's one of the things we have seen is a rise in our entertainers and in our athletes across the community of trying to do a little bit more community involvement. I've seen that here in North Carolina, but also just throughout the country. It seems more and more of our athletes and entertainers are starting to realize the role that they play in terms of being role models, and even though some of them may not want that title, but they still, more than seem to be grasping it and even not just identifying with it, but also like letting it be something that they don't mind being part of their identity. Yes,
and I know, the work of some folks who have been trying very hard to get more athletes to be philanthropic have done a lot of work on trying to help groom athletes to understand what the politics are happening in neighborhoods that many of them have come from, and what does it mean to give and sustain giving for communities that look up to them and but need their presence even more.
Yeah, because I was just wondering, even in your own work, when you would talk to the youth and everything, did you find that a lot of the youth were identifying with what Colin was going through when he was identifying with the Black Lives Matter movement during that time, and actually lost his job, which he's still unemployed at the moment. Hopefully he'll find somebody that will employ him sooner or later. But I was wondering, in the course of conversation, did you have people that were wanting to talk about that and identify with that?
Yes. And in many respects, part of the racial socialization curriculum that we have, racial literacy curriculum, we can talk about Emmett Till and Trayvon Martin and the power of the legacy of that, but also why to connect to what Colin was doing, so that, and notice what happens when you stand up for your voice, how people dismiss your humanity. I mean, just watching how people derided him was a lesson in of itself for young people, and the commitment to take your talent and realize that you could be really talented and people can still reject you. because of racial matters, and that takes real courage.
Did you notice in your research, you just mentioned Emmett Till and some of the others, have you found that a lot of our youth actually understood or knew the history of Emmett Till or some of the other victims of the Mississippi violence that are part of history, or are we still finding our school system stuck with, like, for lack of a better term, the superheroes that everybody knows? And by that I mean like the Martins, the Malcolms, the Harriets, the Frederick Douglasses, the Marcus Garveys, W.E.B. Du Bois, those kind of names that, of course, are, throughout the history books. But I'm wondering how much you're finding our youth actually know about folks like Emmett Till and some of these other things that were definitely part of our history, but I just don't know how much is out there in terms of our school systems actually doing a good job of letting that be known.
Yeah. No, I'm finding that we don't know as much as we think we know, and I think that's part of the problem. Our students didn't know much about Emmett Till by the 8th grade, and I think the other names you mentioned, the boys still be not a popular knowledge. And so my colleague Ebony Thomas at Grad School of Education, she does work on children's books, and she has said for a while that the problem of even children's books, rarely do you see clarity of truth around enslavement. So I think she said close to 300 books focus on kids of color out of 3,000 within a year, 3,000 new books. And so part of the process is that many of those books glorify slavery by talking about heroic efforts without talking about the tragedy. And so I think we have less knowledge now about what's going on in black history than we did even 20 years ago. And that means that the work obviously isn't done, but we're going backwards in kids' knowledge. And they need to know not only the work of, not only the heroes, but also the struggles that the heroes went through. Because in her work, in Ebony Thomas' work, she's finding that kids don't see slavery as that big a deal because they haven't been taught about the horror. And this one last plug, my brother Brian Stevenson is opening a museum. He and his group at Equal Justice Initiative opening a museum in Montgomery, Alabama.
Oh, wow.
In April 26th. And it's about the history of lynching, and it'll be around peace. And it's a legacy or a museum of peace, and a memorial to honor those who have passed, those who've been lynched. They have the largest database of lynching in the history of these men and women who've been murdered. But it's based on the notion that slavery hasn't gone away. It just evolved and has led us to mass incarceration. And so the museum will track that as well as give people a haunting understanding of the trauma and legacy of lynching in this country. And that is an example of why you would want to talk to young people in their own way, developmentally appropriate about our history, and then feel triumphant about how we still are able to have made it this far.
Because that is something that we hear more and more of, particularly, we heard it a lot during the Black Lives Matter movement. We've heard it definitely even among the folks that are against certain kinds of guns and things of that nature being allowed to all citizens. But there's definitely that whole concept of the school-to-prison pipeline, and that is something that a lot of folks do seem to have at least some understanding about, but I don't know if they have a full understanding about it, because I remember I'm even thinking about that movie 13 that was done that actually explored some of the history of how the prisons were tied into the slavery system and how they kind of grew up together and everything. But a lot of folks may not necessarily understand what that history was all about and the tie between prisons and overseers.
Yeah, yes. My brother was in that, actually, and so 13th. And, again, the more you know, the more you realize, wow, I didn't really know. So, yeah.
A lot of times folks don't understand that history until we've actually getting the chance to see those kind of films, and sometimes they take forever to get made. I mean, I know Devereaux wanted to do 13 for some time, but it didn't get made for a long time, and then it finally got out there, and now it's circulating, and a lot of people are understanding what that story is about. And the same thing even with Hidden Images. A lot of people didn't understand that there were some sisters that were making some very important decisions in order for us to get folks into space. So that movie came out and exposed that history that was known to those in NASA, but a lot of other folks had no clue about those ladies that were doing all of that research that helped the astronauts get up to the moon. So, and I'm sure there's many other stories like that that we don't know that we need to be learning about and told those tales. But sometimes we get too stuck on wanting to follow the stereotypes and those things that we know will be successful. I have a friend of mine who was telling me that he gets tired of those movies at some of the film festivals that are strictly the shoot 'em up, bang me up kind of gang-oriented kind of movies that we put out there among our youth, when there are so many other stories that need to be told about some of our great histories that have not been told yet.
Yes, absolutely.
Definitely got to get more of that information out there. Hey, Dean.
Yes, sir.
What you been thinking? You know, I have to pull you in as we wind down. So what you been thinking? What you got to say about the conversation? You know, I can't let you just listen all day long.
Oh, ain't nothing wrong with that, man. I don't mind listening and just lay back sometimes. But when we talk about, I don't know, when we talk about us, I say us as black people, sometimes I think we often want everyone to be on the same ride when they're not. People have different opinions of things. People have different ways of accomplishing things. You were right when you said people don't want to, like, even have conversations. They're non-confrontational at this point, but confrontational at the same time. So, you know, like, they don't want to discuss the real issues or anything like that, but they would be quick to point out something that they do not like, something down that they may not be familiar with. And it puts a further divide between all of us. You know, you talked about using the N-word. All right, so now they're taking a word that, growing up, that was fighting words. You know, you say that word, you might as well call me a bitch. And we're going to fight, and we're going to fight all day long. You know, but now they say they've empowered the word and they've taken ownership of it. I still don't really understand that concept, but you know what? People of like minds often associate together. So now you can try to tell them, and you can give them a whole breakdown of where it comes from, where it's going, where it's been, and they'll call you a nigga as soon as you finish talking. And you can't really get into the mindset of what they're thinking, because even if they explain it to you, you're like, you know what? I still don't understand. Like, I'm still confused. No matter how long they talk, I'm still going to be confused. So now I got to the point where it's like, okay, well, for those who want to do something different and want to do something better, if I'm in a position that I can help them, then I will. For those who are not ready yet, you know where to find me. I'm not hard to find, and I'm easy to get along with. So when you're ready, you let me know, and we'll show you something different. Until then, we'll just let you do what you feel is right, because I have to take care of those that depend on me for whatever it may be, positive, you know, to try to uplift. I can't lift everyone up, but I can definitely do my part to uplift those in the places where I can. I also need advice. I also need encouragement and all of that. So I have those like minds to lean on when, you know, you get to that point where you find that balance. You're able to have conversations with everyone from the person that's a substance abuser to the person with a doctorate degree.